Welcome to day 7. You see something familiar, don't you? You've done this before. We already see our 3 best friends, don't we? The only thing is it's just going to be slightly different. We're learning a new pattern that goes with these AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs. Since we're still kind of early on in this course, I'm going to walk you through this one as well. And then once I think that you really get the hang of it, there won't be as many tutorials for each day. But today, I'm here with you and let's take a look at it. So first of all, we see the first pink words, present, indicative. Remember, this term doesn't matter. You're not obligated to memorize that term. It doesn't matter. All we are doing is what is said there in that little paragraph. We are still learning how to say facts and things that you believe to be currently true in the present tense. However, today we'll practice this with the patterns that apply to the pronoun tú. Tú doesn't have a translation there. Why? Because you should already know it. Remember, building blocks. So, with our 3 best friends, hablar, comer, and vivir, they change. The endings change, like we've talked about many times already. They have a certain ending for whenever you're speaking to a person with the pronoun tú, or you're saying you, like we can see in the example below, right there where it says example, and then it says you speak well. In Spanish, tú hablas bien. Remember, this is just an example. This is not to memorize, okay? These aren't sentences that I'm saying, hey, this is a super practical sentence that you're going to use all the time. Not necessarily. Yes, hablar, comer, and vivir are very common words, and they do happen to be the most common regular ER, IR, and AR verbs, but we're just focusing on the patterns, okay? And here with the example, it's just to prepare your mind to know, hey, that's the kind of sentence we're getting into. You speak well, you eat, you live, you this, you that. Okay, yeah, that's present tense. So it's just prepping your brain. Now, let's get right into this exercise. Same thing as last time that you had this exercise, except for we're just looking at the pattern that corresponds to the pronoun tú, okay? So, tú hablas. Do you notice what happens there? We see pattern to memorize. What's the difference between that and where the original is in the pink square, hablar? The AR, we drop the AR and we add AS. I know technically the A is still there, but there's arguments of why we're technically dropping it and adding it. That's really irrelevant, okay? So we drop the AR and we add AS. That's the thing. So tú hablas. You speak. Try to do a practice sentence. Try to make it work. All right, you see the format in the example, tú hablas bien. That's actually a good thing that you can do with examples is look at the grammar, because as time goes on, you're going to be seeing more things added in those example sentences. And again, it's not to memorize, but it's to kind of be a guide for you. So one thing that the Spanish translation in the example can serve as is an example of how some other grammar stuff goes. So in this case, you see that it's perfectly fine just adding a word at the end of it. So in the example, it's tú hablas bien. You speak well, or you speak good, you speak fine. So what can you do? You can add a different word at the end of your sentence. You're following that as kind of an example, okay? Don't get too wrapped up on getting it perfect, because again, more than anything, it's the pattern that we're memorizing, but this is helpful. So maybe instead of putting bien, like in my example sentence, why don't you write the word bad, but in Spanish, okay? Or any other word that you think makes sense, all right? So, tú hablas. So we add the AS. What does that mean? It means that anytime that you see a regular AR Spanish verb, it's going to conjugate exactly the same whenever you're speaking in the present tense and you're using the pronoun tú. Next word, comer. We already know this word. We know it means to eat, but now we need to know how it changes on the end whenever we're speaking to someone using the word you, or in other words, tú in Spanish, okay? So what do? Let's look over at the pattern to memorize. Tú comes. Tú comes. Look at that. It's a ES. So we drop the ER and we add ES. Yes, I know there's still an E there. Same thing as last time. There's an argument for that, but let's not get wrapped up in that, okay? So tú comes. Anytime that you see a regular ER Spanish verb, it's gonna follow the patterns of comer. So here, try to make a sentence. Tú comes. Maybe you can say you eat a lot. Maybe you say you eat a little. Maybe you say you eat hot dogs. You eat pizza. Doesn't matter. Again, we're not focused on creating sentences right now that are going to be the most practical, useful sentences in the whole world. Because if your whole idea or your whole methodology of learning Spanish is based on memorizing many Spanish sentences, like just many sentences, then if you can do that, then you're a genius, okay? You might as well just go buy a Spanish phrase book and just read it in one day with your photographic memory, and then boom, now you speak Spanish because you memorized a whole book in one night, all right? And then if your brain works that great, then you probably don't even need to buy any book. Just watch a few movies, get a little bit of immersion, and then you're going to memorize the whole language because you're a genius. But that's not the purpose here. The purpose is not to memorize sentences, is just to practice these patterns, because these patterns are going to help you create thousands and thousands of sentences. We're learning Spanish the fastest way, okay? Let's go to the last one here, vivir. We already know what that means. It means to live. It's our example word for regular Spanish verbs that end in IR. What happens? We drop the IR and we add ES. Tú vives means you live. You make your sentence. You know what we're doing. Let's look at the next section for today's lesson. Next page, we have another mnemonic device, or in other words, a memory aid. Remember the formula? We have it right here. An image of what it sounds like to you, an image of the meaning. We merge those two together and we create our memory aid. So let's look at the one below. Now, before we get into this one, let me just say this is just a reminder that you need to be creating memory aids every day, because unless you are just some kind of amazing genius, you need to kind of find these ways to make your brain remember things. Your brain wants to make connections and be creative and stuff like that. So these are very powerful. So this is just a reminder for you to keep making memory aids that resonate to you. Here's a good memory aid. You might like it. You might find a better one, but it's for the word quizás. Quizás. It means maybe. How can we make this stick in our brain? Well, first of all, we make an image of what it sounds like to you. When I listen to the word quizás, I say to myself, what does that sound like? What does that sound like in a language that I speak? Key, it kind of sounds like a key to a lock. And then sas kind of sounds like sauce. Not perfect, not 100%, very close. All right, so quizás is what it sounds like to me, a sauce made out of keys, quizás. And then we create an image of the meaning. So I've created this silly little scenario, this little conversation here. Someone says, maybe this is key sauce, maybe not. And then the key sauce, the bowl of sauce with keys in it, the key sauce, he himself says, perhaps. Maybe this is key sauce, maybe not. Perhaps. It's silly, it's funny, it fulfills the purpose of creating this mnemonic device, and hopefully it will stick in your brain. If you don't like this one, that's okay. You make your own. These are just examples. I'm your Spanish coach. I'm here to coach you along the way, and I'm here to push you and motivate you and remind you of these powerful language learning tools. Last thing in our lesson for today, you recognize what you need to do. It's another vocabulary table. We've got several words here. These are very important words that you're going to use almost every day. I don't have too much to say here. All you got to do is you have to memorize these. I guess one thing that I could say real quick before we wrap this up is the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. In the white spaces, in parentheses, it says corresponds to, and then you have a pronoun there. Like, I'll just say them in English. It'll be like I, you, him, her, they, right? So basically, these are going to be like, okay, theirs, for example. Let's look at the last one. Their, that's their car. That car is theirs, all right? Now, that corresponds to them or they. right? So like in English, I'm just speaking in English right now about the English language. So if I say they own that car, they do. The pronoun is they. Who are we talking about? They own that car. Someone could ask, whose car is that? Oh, that's theirs. Notice I don't say, oh, that's they car. That's they car. No, I say that's their car. So they and their, or they and theirs, they correspond to each other. So same thing in Spanish, okay? So in Spanish, we know that you've already learned, because we're on a building block method, you've already learned that ellos and ellas means they. Well, the words here at the bottom in pink, su and suyo, is their and theirs, okay? That's how they correspond. Anyways, if you have any other questions, just let me know. I think the rest of it you should be able to figure out pretty well. And yeah, we'll see you in day 8.